now, after years, if not decades, of neglect under the party opposite. It's this government that is levelling up across our country.
Well, imagine the shock for the Prime Minister when he finds out it's his party that's actually been in power for the last 13 years. A staggering 14 million people are now living in poverty. 1 million adults can't afford to eat every day. 9 million are skipping meals and cutting back on food. Millions more can't afford to heat their homes, and record numbers are now using food banks. We've got untreated sewage dumped in our rivers, crumbling schools and hospitals. Never in living memory have families got so much poorer over a single parliament. And the Prime Minister expects us all to believe this.
It's this government that is levelling up across our country.
Never underestimate just how thick this government thinks we all are.
Now, while he talks the country down, let me update him on what's actually been happening in the past week. Inflation more than halved from 11% to 4%. Real wages rising. Real wages rising for the 5th month in a row. Last week, rates started falling and millions of people benefited from a tax cut worth £450.
Well, let's break that bollocks down.
Inflation more than halved from 11%.
Well, again, imagine the Prime Minister's shock when the Chancellor tells him inflation actually rose in December. And he'll fall off his chair when he finds out the job of cutting inflation is for the Bank of England. So any suggestion the government is responsible for it falling just insults the public's intelligence. And let's not forget it was this government that gave us the highest inflation in 40 years in the first place, in part due to its incompetent management of the economy.
Mr. Speaker, inflation was over 11% when I got this job.
Well, bearing in mind it was the Conservative government that had been in power for more than a decade at that point, it's not exactly something to boast about. And wasn't Rishi Sunak Chancellor and responsible for managing the economy for more than 2 years almost immediately prior to that?
Yes. But the crucial thing is that inflation has been more than halved, delivered ahead of schedule, and that is having an enormous benefit to families up and down the country.
Contrary to what the Prime Minister keeps telling us, falling inflation is not a tax cut for hard-up families. Falling inflation just means prices are rising more slowly than they were before. It does not mean that price levels are actually falling. So it won't immediately help the families now struggling to put food on the table and heat their homes.
Millions of people benefited from a tax cut.
Under Sunak's government, taxes are on course to reach their highest level since the Second World War. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has found that for every £1 the Treasury has taken from taxpayers, less than 25 pence is coming back in tax cuts. And the Prime Minister wants us to slap him on the back and throw a party. By any standards, Sunak's government is being fundamentally dishonest and outright misleading when talking about tax cuts. In fact, the government's latest tax measures put the UK on course to have the biggest tax-raising parliament in modern history.
Real wages rising.
Seriously? Real wages in 2024 are forecast to be lower than they were in 2006. Just think about that.